And hey, the big story that we are tracking right now, the 15th BRICS Summit. India, Russia, China, Brazil and South Africa. They form one of the world's most important economic blocs.
Right, and the BRICS Heads of State and Government Summit in South Africa's Johannesburg, as we mentioned earlier as well, it seeks to widen the influence and push for a shift in global geopolitics. And yesterday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping flanked South African President Ramaphosa for a family photo at the leaders' retreat.
But the big question that remains here, even today, is that will the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping hold talks on the sidelines of the summit?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of buzz around this as well. Now, of course, as you know, in recent years, the border between China and India, that's become the site of growing tensions. Chinese aggression that sparked clashes along the mostly rugged mountainous border known as the line of actual control here. Amid Xi Jinping's irrational territorial ambitions, both sides have increasingly militarized their border policies and show no signs of backing down.
Well, the border issue remains tense due to China's violation of the norms. Now, Beijing and New Delhi are hardening their positions on either side of the line of actual control. And India is clearly firm. Peace and tranquility in border areas is essential.
Now, New Delhi says it is fully prepared and committed to protecting sovereignty and dignity here. Also important to mention here that Chinese President Xi Jinping skipped a BRICS business forum despite the presence of counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa, Brazilian President Luis Lula da Silva and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course. The Chinese Commerce Minister read Xi Jinping's message, which stated that emerging countries are being blocked and suppressed.
Not only this, at the BRICS Business Summit, Prime Minister Modi described India as a welcome destination for investment.
इस बात में कोई संदेह नहीं कि आने वाले वर्षों में भारत विश्व का ग्रोथ इंजन होगा। ये इसलिए है क्योंकि भारत ने आपदा और मुश्किलों के समय को आर्थिक सुधार के अवसर में परिवर्तित किया। पिछले कुछ वर्षों में हमने मिशन मोड में जो रिफॉर्म्स किए हैं, उनसे भारत में ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस में लगातार बढ़ोतरी हुई है। हमने कंप्लायंस बर्डन को कम किया है, रेड टेप को हटाकर रेड कारपेट बिछा रहे हैं।
Meanwhile, Putin decided against attending in person as he is the target of an international criminal court arrest warrant that South Africa is in theory bound to enforce. In addressing the business forum, the Russian president said that BRICS works for the global majority.
Right, now just let's give you a brief background here. BRICS was founded as an informal club in 2009 to provide a platform for its members to challenge a world order dominated by the United States and its Western allies. Its creation was initiated, in fact, by Russia. And as per UN data, the BRICS grouping represents more than 1/4 of the global GDP and 42% of the world's population.
Well, the BRICS have seen the economic influence increase over the past decades as drivers of global growth, trade and investment. Well, the bloc operates by consensus and all the BRICS countries are a part of the G20 of the major economies.
Right, some 50 other leaders who are not BRICS members, including Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and Indonesian President Joko Widodo, are attending the talks in South Africa. Now, also, Resha, something that we have discussed and something that is set to take center stage at the summit here as well is that at least 40 countries have shown interest in becoming members, with 23 having submitted their applications, and some of the countries aspiring to be BRICS members includes Argentina, Bangladesh, Bahrain, Cuba, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, as I mentioned earlier, Nigeria and Saudi Arabia.
Well, this topic of BRICS expansion, it does remain a point of contention. And
right.
The bloc aspirants view BRICS as an alternative to the global bodies that are viewed as dominated by the traditional Western powers.
And right, they hope that their membership will unlock some sort of benefits, including development finance and increased trade and investment, dissatisfaction with the global order that among developing nations, it was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's when life-saving vaccines were hoarded by rich countries.
Right. Well, and for more on this, we earlier spoke to correspondent Carolyn Ogmu, where she tells us what did the first BRICS meeting, the Business Forum meeting, entail, which took place yesterday. Let's just take a listen.
The BRICS leaders actually sent out a very clear message yesterday at the Business Forum. I have some points made here that what each leader said. If you go into Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was making his remarks virtually, he stated, highlighted in fact BRICS' successes, reducing US dollars share of members' share trades, which he cites as have fallen to 28.7%. He was very unapologetic about what he was saying. In fact, also going on to talk about de-dollarization, saying it is an irreversible process and Russia remains and will be a reliable food supplier to Africa despite illegal sanctions that has been posed to them from the Western countries. Now, India's Modi categorically stated that his country will be $5 trillion economy soon and will be the growth engine of the world. He also welcomed BRICS bloc to invest in India, which is already doing very well. Going by a Chinese Commerce Minister, if you remember, Chinese President Xi Jinping was not present for the BRICS Forum, so his Commerce Minister represented him. So he spoke about, or he emphasized that changes are unfolding and they don't want to focus on inclusive world, and reiterated they are fully open for expansion. Now, if you remember that China has been at the forefront for BRICS expansion, so they mentioned that. And at the end, Brazil's President Lula focused mostly on agriculture, stating that they can support agro and technologies to the BRICS nations, especially to Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa also mentioned a bit about BRICS expansion, stating that leaders meeting towards the end of the day on Tuesday for retreat, they will be discussing amongst various issues. One would be BRICS expansion.
Now, to discuss this further, we're being joined by Ambassador Anil Trigunyat, who is a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation. He's also served in the Indian missions to Cote d'Ivoire, Bangladesh, Mongolia, USA, Russia, Sweden and Nigeria, Libya as well as Jordan. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
My first question to you, sir, today, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is the second day of the BRICS Summit. We saw on day one that there were a lot of talks regarding the expansion of the BRICS Summit. Of course, there seems to be some deep divisions on what sort of course of action they want to take next. What can you tell us about this? How do you assess this?
Well, as you know, that world is going through a global churn. And there is a tremendous crisis of confidence in the bipolar world as well as in the unipolarity of the various major powers. And therefore, there is a greater emphasis on multilateralism, plurilateralism, and the BRICS provides that kind of a comfort zone for various global south countries as well as for the middle powers. And therefore, there is a rush that we are seeing about 40 countries are looking to join the BRICS. And so, in my view, the question is that as India says, and the Prime Minister Modi has also mentioned, that we need to have certain objective criteria rather than just try to create a major implosion and admit everyone. So therefore, guiding principles have to be done. We have seen in the SCO, India, it took 15 years for India to join there. So expansion is a must. When is a question, if is not a question. So there is going to be an expansion for various reasons, because BRICS has been a success story to a great extent. It was supposed to be an emerging economies club, which will eventually dictate the course of the global trade and economy, which it was doing. But it also has its own internal contradictions, as you said, that each country has its own approach to the expansion, has its own favorites, perhaps. So this has to be seen that how a consensus can be arrived at on those parameters under which various countries can be admitted. And this is a good thing because, see, the countries you have mentioned, Saudi Arabia and a lot of Gulf countries, countries from Argentina and Bangladesh and others who want to join. Now you will see that many of them are oil-rich economies. And where is their markets? Their markets are in India and China, or Japan and South Korea, basically the Asian markets. So they are following Act East policy. It's very much a part of it, even though it has a continental footprint coming from 4 continents. So I think that there is going to be eventually when it is. Secondly, this also provides a certain kind of a strategic autonomy and a certain affiliation with the non-Western, I would say, an organization.
Right, sir.
Right, Ambassador, you speak of how the world is going through a global churn at the moment. But talk to us as to how the ongoing summit gives the platform to discuss the concerns of for the global south.
Well, you know that nearly the first thing is the theme that South Africa has chosen, as invited all African countries, and 69 countries are participating from different continents. Now, that in itself, and the theme of this is essentially, as we know, is how to have these accelerated growth. For example, how to have the inclusive multilateralism and sustainable development. I mean, those are the major issues that are impacting currently, be it as a result of the pandemic or Russia-Ukraine war. What the Russia-Ukraine war has really focused is on the 4Fs, and all 4Fs are extremely important. One is the weaponization of the financial instruments. Another is the weaponization of the food, fertilizer, and fuel. Now, all these things have directly impacted the global south. And therefore, in India, as you know, under its G20 presidency, the first thing Prime Minister Modi did was to call for a meeting with the global south. 125 countries participated. They expressed what kind of a platform, what kind of needs that they have that need to be plugged going forward in the G20. And earlier next month, we also have the visit, maybe visit of Xi Jinping and others. So leaders will be descending in New Delhi to discuss other things in a much larger platform. So these issues will be carried forward from here. So India is there, which is looking for it. South Africa, which is the host country, obviously in the 2015 also they had mentioned about it. And they want the African countries to be on board. How the African Continental Free Trade Agreement can be plugged with the BRICS. How the new development bank's footprint can be expanded. Those are the major issues that they are going to discuss. Of course, the currency trading, increasing trade in the national currencies, and Russia will probably flag that it is there for the African countries when it had a Russia-Africa summit recently in St. Petersburg. So they might say that we are ready to provide food and fuel if necessary to the African countries. Now, so all these countries are trying to focus on the global south because the real action is going to be in the global south going forward.
Right. All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on the show with your insights on this.
Thank you.